Welcome to the Procurement Conversation, where we tackle the big issues facing procurement. We have our regular panellists, Martin Smith and Kirsty Carr, and this week we're joined by Tom Mills, the Procurement Protagonist, Procurement TikTok or ProcTok legend, and slide genius. You can find him at Tom Mills Procurement on TikTok. Welcome to the conversation.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Just wanted to say congrats on hitting 10,000 followers before we on LinkedIn before we.
Yeah, that's really appreciate that. I wasn't expecting that. So yeah, it's really nice. Thank you.
So this week we're talking about what procurement should stop doing, and procurement's had a frantic couple of years. So dealing with many challenges that we may have previously had to face once in a career, seemingly every few months. We've had pandemic, inflation, conflict. We've had a full house of force majeure clause issues. And with many teams feeling the strain, something has to give. So what should we stop doing? And in this, we could go into hundreds and hundreds of suggestions. So we're going to try and stick to maybe the less obvious ones, potentially some of the more contentious ones. So we can have a bit of debate around that. There's some that are a given. The stop moaning about not having the seat at the top table. It was one that came out quite a few times. So Tom, over to you. I mean, what you're head of procurement at Bibby. What have you stopped doing, and what do you think we should stop doing more generally?
You're right, Rich. There's so many things that we could talk about stopping doing, but one of the things that I'm really passionate about, and maybe a good one to kick this off, is stop sounding like a SIPS textbook when you talk to people within the business. I really passionately believe in this one because if you think about it, there's been lots of studies around culture and what leads to exclusion. And the biggest thing that leads to exclusion within any culture is language, whether that's not being able to speak the same language, having a different accent, that type of thing. So I've never understood why procurement individuals, when they engage with the organization, think that by using all sorts of acronyms, long words, being really kind of procurementy when you're talking to stakeholders, why they think that that's important. And I think if we could stop doing that, we could really drive really good, strong engagement with the rest of the business.
Yeah. I totally agree with that one. I think I guess some of it's trying to be a bit clever and actually, you can talk plain language to people. We're talking about, it's commercial things. The language that salespeople use is it's a different approach, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a point as well around explaining things simply. It's the classic, probably get this quote wrong now, but the Albert Einstein quote: "If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough." And I think that sometimes it's very easy to hide behind acronyms and language around procurement to kind of show some kind of technical expertise, which somehow creates this kind of elitist view of why the profession's needed. But actually, all that does is create barriers to good engagement. And the only other thing I just wanted to mention is I've been in situations where I've mentioned to a room full of people the word RFP, and I've already seen almost half of them switch off because they genuinely don't understand what an RFP is. And I think it's very easy when you're in your profession to just think, right, I know what I understand it, so why shouldn't everyone else? We should stop that, and we should start talking in a common language.
I agree. I think that also that sort of business jargon and procurement sort of language is being sort of there, like you say, with the SIPS tech, but we also see that correlate onto job descriptions. We read these, as you can appreciate, hourly, these job specs, and it's just like, sorry, what is it you're actually wanting? And you've just got all this generic stuff on there that's just gumph. And I always sort of try and cut through the noise with hiring managers, but you see it all the time. And I totally agree. I think it just needs to be more mature, modern language that plays more on the soft skills and the behaviors and actually also sharing. Wouldn't it be nice if you read a job spec that actually sometimes said, procurement isn't mandated and it's not in a great place, or whatever it might be, just something a bit more realistic. And similarly, when you're talking to suppliers, rather than giving them the whole beauty parade and all this business jargon, you can actually be quite real with them, because you would on a phone call or a Teams call, wouldn't you? So why does the text has to be there? So no, I totally agree.
So Martin, you've covered off one of mine for later.
Oh, sorry.
No, while we're talking about it now, I think it's a good one. My one was to stop this sort of cookie cutter recruiting, to tear up the job specs. And you see job specs and you look at it, you think, I'm sure that that must have been like circa 2005, and they've just literally because it's something you don't do very often. I think maybe you're recruiting someone every sort of 9 months, 12 months, whatever. You just sort of pull out this one that you have in your locker, and it can be quite ancient. Dust it off and sort of send it out, and people looking at it going, don't understand half of this. So that's definitely one I've got.
I generally have clients, I won't mention them by name, but they'll say like we've hired them a category manager for, I don't know, marketing, and they'll say, oh, it's the same JD as that one, it's just HR or IT or whatever, and it's like, but it's surely not. Surely it's an incredibly different stakeholder group, and surely. So we see that all the time, and I just think it needs completely revamping. I talk about it a lot, but I think the language needs modernizing. Because procurement has modernized, let's be clear, with all the stuff we're going to talk about today about what it's not doing or needs to stop doing. It's come a long way, but I think the language still, I totally agree. I think it's just still quite archaic. And like you say, it's that cookie cutter approach. Most procurement manager job specs, if you look on LinkedIn and just literally search procurement manager and do a search, most of the job specs will be exactly the same. There'll just be a different location, a different industry.
Yeah. Kirsty, what have you got? Do you want to kick off with one?
So I'm going to go with stop operating in the past. So stop operating old school methodology, stop operating 1970s business behaviors. Stop hiring complete carbon copies of yourself. Look for something a bit more innovative for your team. So definitely. Yes, I do think procurement has moved forward, but I do think we've still got a way to go. Stop sort of living in the past.
It's a good one.
Can you explain a bit more about living in the past, Kirsty? So what do you mean in that way?
So things like RFP processes, things like procurement policies, things that, were first done 40, 50, 60 years ago. And every time you get a new leader of a procurement team, there's a slight iteration to it, but nobody ever redesigns it. They just pick it up and add a few paragraphs in. It becomes a bit more clunky. We stick to a process because it's what we've always done, instead of going, actually, is this fit for purpose anymore? Does this fit with our industry? Does it fit with our business model? Does it fit with our teams? Is it engaging? So there's that point again of being brave, isn't there? And saying, okay, this is our as is, and what's our to be, and how do we want it to look like? Because we've got that, like Tom, you were saying about autonomy, you would have that autonomy within your team to change that. So it's taking that leap of faith and maybe doing things differently.
I think stop adding to the process. We've got to take some stuff out because otherwise it's like the contracts, isn't it? The contracts they get longer and longer and longer over time, and people don't. They rarely. I see contracts and they literally talk about the EMU. They talk about these things from the 90s, the Millennium Bug. Sometimes that comes up, and it would be Millennium Bug compliant. You can take that stuff out now. You don't need to. It's like 22 years ago. We are a bit of a. You just sort of keep shoveling it in, and it just gets more complex, more onerous.
Yeah, there's an assumption that you have to do the same thing. I mean, even just talking about the RFP, for example, it's always a default position of, we need to run an RFP. Well, there's so many different ways that you can go about approaching a vendor selection process. And I think it takes a bit of bravery and confidence to be different and to stand out. But there's a point around we should start... It's not about what we should start, but we should stop kind of allowing our self-confidence to be kind of eroded by the business, if that makes sense. We should be confidently moving forward with what we know will drive the best value. So,
I think you sometimes find as well, like reverting back to the SIPS manual or reverting back to, like you're saying, Kirsty, some of that kind of archaic language is made because the business doesn't understand procurement. So you kind of just go, right, let's go back to my training. Okay, it's this. I'm not excusing it, but I think that's sometimes when businesses don't understand it, they've never really used procurement in an effective way. I think that's often when they start regurgitating the manual, as it were.
Yeah.
That's when we need to stop working in a silo in that case then, and get out and about into the business and educate them.
Yeah, education, definitely.
I had that one as well. Working in silos, we've got step outside, and also bring in new thinking. So break down the silos, bring in people from outside in other business areas. Step outside. That sort of cross-pollination of ideas is really important.
Yeah.
Is that silo mentality still quite prominent in the sectors and areas you've worked in?
I don't recognise the silo element. Perhaps you could do with some explanation, actually, Rich.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen it in some. I mean, my background's mainly in IT, so you do. Yeah. You will see sort of, and I think it has been breaking down over the years. So you used to have like the IT organization, which was a very, I guess, separate. It was running the IT on behalf of the business, and as long as it was running okay, then the business didn't really care. But then over the years, that's broken down because there's more technology that's going into customer facing. There's been a lot more digital disruption, that type of thing. So that's broken down those barriers. So then it's sort of making sure that procurement's like fully integrated into that process, and even to the point of, if you work in some agile projects, then having the procurement lead within a sort of a scrum team or whatever to be managing that agile project. So yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, but I've seen it in a number, especially I thought financial services was probably a little bit more silent.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's been your experience.
Probably less so. I know where you're coming from. I think there's a spin-off point though here that is related, and that's procurement stop trying to do everything. So we should be promoting advocates of procurement within the business. I find that the best way to drive good procurement within the business is to give people within the teams training, responsibility, create a framework for them. But I think there's a kind of natural tendency for procurement individuals to think, oh, I've got to control this process end to end. Actually, we'll get much bigger buy-in and a much bigger value and leave a much bigger legacy within the business if you help train individuals within and across the functions to procure well than you will from the work that you do. So I'm going to say, stop trying to do everything.
Yeah.
Stop feeling like you have to control everything. I think there's a control mentality around procurement individuals, which comes back to that kind of living in the past, that kind of victim culture, which I think, Kirsty, you were mentioning. We need to be more confident with allowing the business to procure, providing we provide the framework, the training, the tools and the templates to enable them to do so.
I guess my challenge to that would be, realistically, in a large organisation that's very busy and lots of different departments doing lots of different things, the work is needed up front to get them to a point where they want to learn that, where you feel that you can let that go and there's still going to be value to the business, because otherwise you're going to get yourself back into that maverick space. So I still think there has to be an element of control in some degree. Yes, we don't need to have a footprint across the entire thing, but we have to be responsible for how that's fashioned and rolled out.
Yeah. Can I use the mantra then, freedom within a framework? So we set the framework.
You can use that, yes.
and that's fundamentally the philosophy that I try to apply. So back to your point on control, Kirsty, isn't the most important thing for any procurement individual or function to be able to assert that control is to get upfront visibility of when the business is about to spend money. So
100%.
So then if we get that upfront visibility and we make people, then I'm saying at that point we can determine, right, what level of confidence do I have around the team that are going to be doing this? What training do they need? How should I guide? How should I play? So I'm not saying we shouldn't be there, but I'm saying we should empower individuals to perhaps run that process a bit more.
It's like a scale, isn't it? I guess it moves along the maturity scale of, okay, when you're ready to go, right, okay, I'm going to delegate that bit to you because you know what you're doing, you know what you need, you know what the process is. We've worked enough together, Mr. Stakeholder, Mrs. Stakeholder, Miss Stakeholder, for you to know what the expectations of the business are going to be and what you're going to need to evidence, for example. So, yeah, I think as you move along that maturity scale, that's definitely an opportunity.
Yeah.
Okay. Martin, do you have any from a recruitment point of view you wanted to throw in?
Yeah, I've got a few. I'll try and be as diplomatic as I can. So the one I was referencing before we went on air was so we are our supplier, to the procurement community, look under that HR category where obviously recruitment sits. So we'll have these initial engagement conversations with a Tom Mills of the world or someone within the HR category. And they'll talk around collaboration, all the nice strategic, partnership, truly seeing some of that valued partner, which is great. And I come off the call feeling really empowered and looking forward to the relationship, and we'll send our terms, and then we just get this the T's and C's through, and these unbelievably onerous clauses, and low rates and ridiculously high payment terms, and there's just like, it was as if we had two separate conversations, one on the phone or on Teams or face to face, and one on an email. So I guess you got to practice what you preach, right? Stop saying one thing and then acting the other, because it just doesn't marry up. So I think that's something that we see, not a lot. I mean, let's not be dramatic. We're not seeing this in every conversation we have, but it is something that's quite common in the recruitment profession. And obviously procurement, who ultimately are controlling that process and the commercials, are the ones also we're dealing with. So I think that is the big area for us.
I think that's quite a common one. I think there is an intent in a number of areas to form partnerships with certain organisations, but then there are some organisational mandates around things like payment terms and some of the risk profile that legal may want to have in the contract and those sort of things. And actually, they give like the complete opposite message to what the conversation you're trying to have is one around partnership, and you're sort of treating them like a sort of a commodity vendor, really.
Yeah, I think it's about not diminishing the relationship, because as soon as one element of side of the relationship feels diminished, then you're not going to get a good value partnership anyway. I wonder, Martin, whether some of that comes from a kind of laziness around just providing a generic template and not really adapting that to the conversation you've just had. When I say laziness, maybe that's harsh, because one thing that most procurement teams are is very time poor. They have to just quickly move forward. So sometimes the simplest thing to do at the start is to say, right, here's our best possible terms, as in from our side of things, and let's just hope that they agree. But I'm not sure that, to your point, that leads to the best collaborative opening to a partnership. So,
no. I think that one of the challenges, which I guess procurement, needs to look at more holistically there, is it just shows, going back to your point around the silo mentality, it shows that the HR community aren't talking to procurement, because ultimately HR are governing that and managing that, relationship with recruiters, and procurement and them aren't talking. So they're just interested in the terms. They're not going to have those relationships with every agency. This is HR I'm talking about, but procurement, it's a key hire for them. So I don't think they're talking. I think what good practice looks like is a heads up, guys. The payment terms are X. We'll look to try and get Y. I understand that maybe our commercials aren't as lucrative as others. This is why. That's fine. That's not a problem. You've got some rationale there, and you're actually having a human conversation with someone. But I think that needs to be done. I mean, that overlays to everything. I mean, I'm just talking from a recruitment perspective, but I think that clearly correlates across all the it's supplier relationship management, isn't it? That's what it comes to. And I think it's truly doing that in the right way.
You used the human word there. I think, Tom, did you have one that would fix?
I smiled because I was just going to come back to my mantra. How about just being a decent human being? And I think that procurement, I've almost, and this comes back to Kirsty's point about perhaps living in the past a little bit, almost created this kind of barrier in terms of, we've got to be the mean people who come in and are really hard, and we've got to be really kind of putting up barriers and hard to negotiate with. But actually, when you think about where businesses are going and where we are in 2022, the importance of deriving really good, sustainable, long-term partnerships with the right suppliers is now more than ever the most important thing that any businesses need. So I think we've got to start being decent human beings and stop seeing suppliers as the enemies. I think I'm very passionate about that one, and I have to say I've been guilty of it in the past. It maybe a younger Tom Mills was a little bit more egotistical in the way I bought, but it's short term. It doesn't really drive where we need to be, and in 2022 we need to be much more forward facing.
You're only as good as your suppliers, right?
Yeah.
It's I think I would, if I look back at the beginning of my career, I'd say it probably was way more aggressive than I am now, but it is definitely that win-win mentality, and that has to be at the forefront of whatever we do, whether that's talking to our stakeholders about what's win-win for procurement and your function, whether that's talking to our suppliers about what does win-win look like. I want you to be profitable as my supplier. I want you to still be in business in 5 years' time because I still want or need or can forecast that I want your service. So I totally agree. And I think the world's been through enough the last couple of years. It's time to do business in a much more, grown up, mature, friendly way. These are people like, I don't know about you, but I'm still friends with suppliers that I worked with 20 years ago in different industries and people that I've met along the way, because I've created relationships that mean something. And I also think we need to stop being that adversary. We need to be an ally in whatever that we do, because we can't expect things to work through the bad times if we don't create a relationship where there's trust and honesty and transparency. So if things do go wrong, we leverage that relationship to work through it. And that's another thing that I would like to see procurement teams stop doing, and that's shying away from having those great relationships with suppliers, because it's okay to have a good relationship with a supplier.
Yeah. Stop being so process oriented and start being more relationship oriented.
Yeah, I think Kirsty, you mentioned a key word there, trust. And it's interesting you talk about the trusted relationships that you've had over many years, and actually that can be really hugely powerful from a procurement perspective, because if you know decent technology providers that you've worked with in the past, you're far more likely to have a good relationship with them moving forward and be able to invite them to tenders and be able to get a willing partnership. So I think we need to start being a little bit more genuinely collaborative in our approach.
Yeah,
definitely. And not be afraid to walk away. It's not always going to be, they're not always going to be the right supplier. And actually suppliers evolve, they change, your point of contact can leave, they can change industry. It's okay sometimes to walk away. That doesn't mean you're saying that, you need to fall out with them or create a difficult situation. It's not always right, and don't always put yourself through the mill of that. I see it all the time with people that they're stressing around a contract they've signed up to or a supplier they're engaging with. It's like, well, it's okay not to work. You can't work with everyone, of course. So you've got to choose the right suppliers that are right for you and right for your business.
That's given me another one. Can we stop ghosting suppliers when we don't pick them for projects? Can we not do that? Because it's just rude.
Did they do that? Did people do that?
Yeah.
Sorry to mention my LinkedIn, but I did a video rant on that a couple of weeks ago because I'd heard about a scenario of an individual who wouldn't respond to anyone who'd lost an RFP, would just send an email to say, sorry, you've lost. And I'm thinking, wow, so you've got real people on the other end of this process who have spent hours, often at difficult times of year, completing an RFP, all of the commercial pressure that they have to face internally, and they go through the presentation, they get all the commercials internally approved, they're excited about the opportunity, and then they just receive one-line email from a procurement team saying, sorry, you've not been successful. I find that completely unacceptable in any walk of life. And actually, Kirsty, ghosting is probably the worst thing you can do to anyone anyway, whether that's in procurement or in life in general. And that comes back to my point about just being a decent human being. Just life's too short. And actually, if the last 2 years has taught us anything, it is just be decent to each other.
Yeah.
You don't know when you might need that supplier again, though. So it's very short-sighted to just go, not this time and not bother. I mean, it's just not. It's not a great outward expression of our community, and it's one that I would like us to really work on improving.
It undermines your credibility as well.
Yeah,
and to your point, Kirsty, you're right. You wouldn't, if I was a supplier, I wouldn't engage with that procurement individual again. And that comes back to my point. We've got to be thinking long term now. We've got to be talking partnerships.
Oh, we just had a comment actually come in that talks to that point. So, yeah, there's a legacy way of running which I think is the process orientated way, and actually it's more collaborative and agile approach. That's the more relationship oriented way, and that's ultimately longer term, greater success, better relationship. That was a good comment. And then I also saw from Laura, debrief helps both parties to learn. So that's very true. Definitely.
Yeah, I think sometimes what puts procurement individuals off that session is if the suppliers kind of almost see it as another opportunity to try and pitch. I think if you're really open and honest and you're very clear, and sometimes part of building trust is just being very, very clear. But having those conversations, don't hide behind emails. It's 2022.
There's another good one here as well, actually. If you can't start a bad news email with "as discussed," don't send it.
Yeah.
And
I like that one from Vaughan. Brilliant.
Yeah. And Anthony as well. There, don't ghost us. Yeah, call them all up. Or have the face to face if you can. But people can. They can learn, and you can learn as well, because the other thing is getting feedback on the process. So you want to be understanding how the suppliers found it. Looking to bring that into the continuous improvement. So
absolutely, that's a really good point. You want to make sure that when you do it again, it's even better for the next round of people to be engaged in. Really, really good point.
Yeah. Can I throw one in, Rich?
Yeah.
It's probably just taking a different slant. Stop the ego when it comes to procurement. So what I mean by this is so many instances where procurement individuals start claiming savings that they've delivered. And I always think that we should be talking about the value that we've driven alongside the business. And I think that the problem with some of the procurement metrics, and this again probably comes back to Kirsty's point about living in the past, we seem to have this template of, we've got to deliver all of these traditional metrics, which procurement-driven metrics, whereas actually they can be quite often meaningless to the business.
Yeah.
And often those traditional metrics are because procurement has this kind of inbuilt need to kind of justify their existence, and we've got to prove our return on investment is 7 to 1 or whatever. A good procurement team shouldn't need to justify their existence. They should be foundationally driving the value that the business delivers. So I just think we need to stop with the ego a little bit.
Yeah. I had tracking. We should stop tracking metrics the business doesn't care about, and we can do starts as well. I did say we do some starts, but start aligning metrics with the business. So, why aren't we measuring how much we're reducing the time to value, supply-driven innovation, like true risk mitigation, efficiency, scope 3 carbon reduction, all those types of things. Like get these aligned with the business and be doing that together outside of the silos. With business stakeholders. So
it's a good one. I see we use business partnerships a lot. That's the new buzzword. But to me, you can't be a true business partner if you've not got a shared objective with the team you're working with. So that's a really important one. You have to be part of their team. You've got to walk their walk. So start being open to shared objectives.
Kirsty, that's really important in marketing space as well, isn't it? With brand procurement. And I mean, you've discussed that quite a lot over the last year in terms of the traditional procurement metrics just don't play into the brand marketing metrics. And actually, we wonder why we aren't able to successfully drive engagement with the marketing teams. It's because we're not speaking in the same language. So I think that's really, really important. Let's face it, a lot of money is spent in the marketing space, but it's probably the area that has the least procurement engagement, and we need to look inwardly and introspect.
It goes back to your beginning point. It's set up to fail if you don't speak the same language. So the important thing about any procurement marketing relationship is commonality. You've got to find the common ground. You have got to sit down with your marketing partner and say, okay, this is traditionally what procurement does in a nutshell. Explain to me what you do. Explain to me what you need. Explain to me why you have the suppliers that you have, what they're delivering, how that ecosystem works. And then I'll start to think about how I could add value to that and make your life better. And that's the conversation with marketing. You don't get there until you say, okay, I'm ready to share your objectives. So if you fail, I fail. I'm not going to go away and go, well, I got my savings, thank you. I'm going to be with you and go, we didn't hit that one. Okay, why didn't we hit that? Okay, we'll go again and do it better next time. So I think shared objectives are really important.
It's asking, I agree, and it's asking those open questions to the business and your team and the state. It all comes back to that, and do the active listening, because you can't know, from a sales technique, we can't know what to sell unless we know what the candidate wants. And it's exactly the same with a supplier or a member of your team. There's no point just running in and talking about what you do and how great procurement are and what the value you've done. In my career, I've done this. It's redundant. They don't need to know all that. So I think that's so important. And the truly best procurement leaders, the one that are really good at listening. It's not the talking, it's the listening. And I was going to say, just to contextualize that, I've had it actually it's quite good with doing this today, because I've had a number of people recently that And I'm going to say, stop moaning about the business not seeing the value that procurement can drive. If you can't communicate that, it means you don't understand the business. So you can't, the business doesn't understand you. So it all comes back to that. And it's something for me that's quite a bugbear when people say, oh, they don't really understand what I do. That's not on them. That's on you. You've not clearly communicated with them and understood what they need. I think that's massive.
That's
every business has their own unique kind of requirements from that point of view. For some businesses, risk will be far more important than driving savings, or some businesses, they'll have far more of an emphasis on return on investment for marketing spend, that type of thing. And you've got to fundamentally understand the business you work in terms of how you're going to drive the value. Martin, that's a great point.
Thank you. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
So where should we go next? We've had some posts over the last few days, had some good engagement on from people. We had some good ones I thought I'd read out and just shout out to a few of the people who've engaged there. So we've got James Meads was stop thinking like technocrats, start innovating and be more open to radical change. That was a good one. Sarah Bean, stop negotiating by email, make human contact, build strong relationships and partnerships.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyone can be hard behind an email, can't they? But,
yeah. And it's an easy thing to do, isn't it?
Good old keyboard warriors.
Yeah. I'm going to be really angry in this email, and then be really nice when they phone.
Yeah.
Richard Struthers, I think this was a favourite of ours.
Yeah, I love this one.
So this is the change in the mindset from not being servants but being peers of the business. Eric McMillan, building complex processes without input from business partners. I think that's another one, isn't it? We just come up with these, dream up these crazy processes in isolation, and then do it to the business, and the business is sitting there going, "Oh, what are we doing?" Ben Painter, stop ignoring innovators and startups because of their perceived lack of maturity. There's real commercial advantage to being an early adopter. So
really agree with that one.
That's a really interesting point, isn't it?
As well. Being in a startup, but definitely agree with that one. And Nick Langham as well. So doubting the massive impact. So this is stop doubting the massive impact it can and should have on the success of the business. That's procurement. And walking away from those businesses that fail to enable their procurement teams to realise that success.
Rich, just on that point, I was going to say one of my big stops was, and this was going to be potentially a bit controversial, is where you get to the stage, whether that's within a business or within a certain function within the business, where you feel like you're literally banging your head against a brick wall and you're never making any progress. I would argue that you almost stop wasting your time, if that makes sense. So focus on where you can know that you'll get traction and drive value. Because there are certain instances, and I'm prepared to be challenged on this, where for whatever reason, the stakeholder just refuses to get it, will not get it, just continues as they are. And then obviously there's various escalation channels you can take. But I wonder whether procurement individuals waste a lot of their time trying to break down those barriers. And actually, we should just focus on where we know that we can work with stakeholders who get it.
That's a good point, isn't it? Yeah. I don't know. It's don't know whether to challenge or not, but that's.
I was expecting Kirsty to challenge.
I don't challenge that one at all. I think there's an element of there's an equation there to do with effort versus output, isn't it? And then also there's a small piece of me that would kind of be in that position. Well, okay, you go away and do things your way, and then when it all blows up in your face, because it inevitably will at some point, because you haven't got a handle on the whole process, then when you're ready to come back and talk, then we'll have a grown-up conversation about why I'm an ally, not an adversary, and why it's okay for me to be on your project management team, and it's okay for you to ask for my help, and it's okay for me to ask you to explain more. I think it's I'm not saying as a horrible person I want people to fail, but there is a point where you have to say, okay, well, so be it. On your head, you go out and do what you do. If it works, fine. If it doesn't, then we'll have to have that conversation when it comes to it, because I think you're right. You could be putting 15% into another category and delivering much more somewhere else than, you know, chasing your tail around. So again, that comes to you being brave and saying, I'm not going to waste my time anymore. Like, when you're ready to engage with me, I'll be waiting, but I'm not going to be knocking on your door anymore.
I think that's a difficult one, though, because I guess we see it with a more junior candidate, you know, a junior person in a procurement function. If they've got a challenging stakeholder that just aren't playing ball, they're not listening, they've tried every angle, they're just going to call us and go, I'm out. And then Tom's going to lose a member of his team or whoever, you know, the head of. So actually, it's quite a common cause of people exiting businesses because there's a stakeholder or someone within the business that's just a bit of a bad apple.
But then I see that as a leadership issue.
Yeah,
so that's where a leader needs to be stepping in and not leaving a junior person exposed in a way that they're going to feel that. So if that's happening, then, you know, I would question the quality of the leadership within that setup.
Yeah.
Stop setting your team up to fail. That's
exactly. Like, you know, if you're a leader, your responsibility is first and foremost to your team, and it's to support them and it's to help them grow and develop, not to leave them hanging. That's not great.
But if that's we've seen it recently with someone that's kind of the marketing buyer that owned that whole category, that whole spend. They've had that issue with a very senior person in the business that just doesn't see the value. They go native. They just don't.
Just going to say that'll be because the leader has no idea what marketing procurement is. That'll be because there's a complete disconnect between the value that being a category buyer or a business partner for procurement brings versus what it might be in the engineering, chemical, operational, IT space, where we're talking huge, massive numbers, nice and shiny. You can really say we pulled this project together. That, to me, screams disconnect between them understanding the marketing space as a leader.
And then when the two senior bodies butt heads, that's when it's, you know, who blinks first? I don't know. Yeah.
It can be very demoralizing for an individual that's in that situation, and then that comes back to my point on, and I think Kirsty referenced it, the energy that we expend, and there's a lot of an emotional energy within the procurement function. It requires resilience, but I wonder whether sometimes we should just be a little bit more proud of where we can deliver success and move forward, and then let success breed success. So the biggest way to really gain traction within the business is to get some really good news stories that might not be in the function that you want to deliver it in, but then that in itself drives the engagement, and then you get other people turning around and say, oh wow, actually maybe I do want a piece of procurement support for my next project.
Agreed.
It's right. Emotional.
I've got this is a LinkedIn one actually, rather than the procurement one specifically, but it's on LinkedIn. Procurement should stop lurking and start to engage. And this is something that Tom, your content is a breath of fresh air. You're an actual head of procurement posting on LinkedIn. But yeah, I really feel that we talked about it a few weeks ago when we were talking about the talent crisis within procurement, trying to bring new people into procurement. And a way of doing that is for people to be open about what it is they're working on, how things go, and getting on TikTok that's the ultimate. But yeah, I think there is a concern from people, or there's a sort of a reticence, and I was going back probably 5 years ago. I was reticent about posting stuff on LinkedIn because you always think, well, suppliers looking over my shoulder or whatever. But I think we just got to be more open and not really care so much.
Yeah, I'm going to have to come in on this one because this is something I'm really passionate about. There's two things I'd say. Firstly, I think the importance of developing your network within procurement now is more than ever, because you need to have a good established network of knowledge. You're only as good or as experienced as your network, in my view. So that's really important. The other thing is, if we think about the point I mentioned about 15-20 minutes ago about developing closer relationships with suppliers, why shouldn't we be open? Why shouldn't we be transparent about our challenges? Why shouldn't we look to build those partnerships? And that's a big reason that I'm quite active on LinkedIn, because I want sales teams to understand the pressures we're under. I want to be able to deliver better relationships. I think the other thing is businesses need to understand that the tide has turned in terms of their own brand marketing, in terms of, the individual now is far more important in terms of promoting a business online than the brand itself in many instances. And so enabling procurement individuals to start talking and being more open online will only help them.
What, Tom, just on that, because I've known you for a long time now, and certainly it's really visible the last, certainly I think it's fair to say 12 months, 18 months, you've really sort of, it feels for me, for someone that knows you well, the tap was turned on and the social media engagement was just, it's brilliant what you do. I think it's really brave, actually, genuinely, particularly with the TikTok content and stuff. I think it's fantastic. A lot of our network and peers of yours would be kind of concerned, worried, overthink doing that. So I think it's really commendable that you've done that. But what was there a light bulb moment? Was there just a moment you're like, I'm going to do more? Or
do you know, I think the switch on was the pandemic, and there was obviously some job insecurity around that point. But actually, that was almost the tipping point in me thinking, well, actually, how do I differentiate myself, and how do I establish a network when effectively I'm sat at home all the time? And so that was a tipping point. And then the confidence comes from actually just getting on and posting. And I think I used to be quite a perfectionist and think, I can't post something unless everything's completely right and it's all, I've checked it 100 times. And now I just realize that actually people aren't looking for that. They're just looking for interesting insight. So I think that's a tipping point. The other thing is, I would say I'm fortunate to work in a business that totally gets it and totally empowers and gives autonomy for individuals to do this. I think there's many businesses which have much more of a stiff corporate identity that almost constrain individuals. I think ultimately that's to the detriment of the businesses, and that's why I think we're at a tipping point. Those businesses that will get it will enable and empower people to be open about their personality online.
Can I? That I think that's good. I think the pandemic, I think that's really interesting, and I agree. I think you're creating a community online, aren't you? Because you're not able to do it as much. It's not as accessible face to face. There's a comment and some rhetoric that's been going around for a while now, not just from LinkedIn, just general social media, and about stop posting for the sake of posting. I'd love to get everyone's views on that one.
Kirsty, you go for it.
I post once a week because I'll be super honest, and I'm very candid about this. I don't enjoy it. I know I need to and all of that, but I'll post when I've got something to say. I'm quite happy to support other people posting, and I'm quite happy to comment and get involved in a conversation, but I'm not going to be, I'm going to post 3 times a day to make sure that I've got all of this engagement, blah, blah, yawn, because it just doesn't interest me. I've got other stuff I need to do. So I'll post once a week. If people are engaged, brilliant. If they're not, then I'll post again next week. I won't worry about it.
There's no wrong or right. And I think just on that point, Kirsty, I'm totally anti all of these influencers who say, you've got to post X number of times a week and you've got to post at this time of day. Only post when you genuinely believe it's going to add value to your audience. Otherwise, just shut up.
Yeah, love it. Absolutely, 100% concur with that statement.
I agree as well. And I think because you notice when people are, I think you really notice when people are posting for the sake of posting. Yeah. If you've got something to say that'll add value, whatever that topic is, I think that's great. And that's great content. But I think it's crept in LinkedIn, this world of, I don't know, just I'm going to post what I had for breakfast and I'm going to post.
Me and Tom had this conversation a couple of weeks ago, didn't we? And I actually said to Tom, I'm just so, like, at the minute, I don't know why, but the last couple of weeks, I'm just really over LinkedIn because I've got Facebook. So if I want to see where you've gone with your family and what you've had for your tea, I'll jump over to Facebook. I just find it, I don't want it to be a stuffy platform because I am not stuffy corporate, but I do think there's an element of it's kind of lost its way. So I think definitely want to be personable and approachable, but I want to still talk about business stuff, like not everything else.
There's a fine line. There's a balance in terms of adding some personality, making sure that you come across as an individual, as a person, but also making sure that you're truly adding insightful, valuable content that could help others. So I totally agree, Kirsty.
Yeah, I think I'd sort of, I guess my disagreement would be, I think we do need to sort of show you who we are as well. I think otherwise, as you say, it becomes a bit dry. So, and
I agree. But when there's only 1 in 1,000 business posts or something that's going to create a conversation, or it can get a little bit
Yeah.
I don't mind learning about people and make it, and getting to know somebody, but fundamentally, the purpose of LinkedIn originally was to bring businesses together and for us to share practice and understand and learn from each other. And yes, I want to know people's personalities, but I don't want it to be completely social. That's just my own view. There are other platforms for that for me.
But it's the most. It's quite interesting because the most sales calls and emails and content that I get is from these sort of social media strategists and these businesses that contact you going, hey, I've noticed Talent Drive's podcast and we could do this to amplify you by 27,000 people. I don't actually necessarily want 27,000 people to, you know what I mean? I just think I like the community we've built. I think it's still growing. I like connecting with new people, as I know we all do on this, which is brilliant. But I think, I don't know, like I don't need someone to spend, I don't need to spend 4 or 5 hours a week to hypothesize on what times I should post and what I do. I think if you've got something genuine to say it, it's brilliant. I'll add content. I won't mention him. We had a procurement guy that generally called me and was stressing that he only got 4 likes on a post and what he's doing. Doesn't matter. The post was good though. The post was relevant. He picked something from the SIPS news website and talked about it. And it was something to modern slavery. It was really interesting. I was like, that's good. Don't worry about it. If
you get wrapped up in the voluntary metrics,
you get wrapped up.
It loses all of its point, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
But there's a really important point I just want to add there. The most value I've got from LinkedIn is the contacts I've made. So, for example, Kirsty Rich, I didn't know you before LinkedIn. There's about 10 or 15 individuals that I now can regularly pick up the phone, have a chat with, who are valuable contacts that I would not have known were it not for LinkedIn. So I know you mentioned the 10,000 followers at the start. That's a vanity metric. It's not relevant in terms of how it makes me a better procurement individual. The true connection is through the people that you actually meet and talk to. And that comes back to my point around we probably lost the ability to be able to connect through things like conferences as much over the last couple of years. But now I feel like I've got a stronger network because of LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So if you don't have any more stops, then are there any starts that we should be doing?
Well, that's a broad question for the end of the discussion.
Well, what's your 1 or 2 big starts that we should be start doing? Now we've stopped all this stuff. What are we going to start?
Start making procurement more fun.
I like that one.
And start really enjoying it and conveying that enjoyment in the way you interact with the business. I think that it's got a stuffy reputation, and that's not helped by certain individuals who just don't really see the fun in it. And I'd say start making it more fun, make it more appealing to people who are wanting to join the profession at the start of their careers as well.
Definitely, that's a great one.
I just want to pick up on that because that ending is kind of dovetails into to start nurturing talent and bringing in the new generation. There's a talent shortage. I won't talk about it today, but we talked about on this before, but we need to start genuinely investing in local colleges, universities, schools, degrees at academia to bring in the new talent, because there's a huge skill shortage. And if we want to grow procurement as a profession, we need to nurture that and develop that talent. So we need to start doing that.
If there was a clap emoji that I could go on to now, I'd be doing that.
Yeah, definitely. Mine would be just stand tall and proud of your function and your profession. That, be proud of what you do and what you add and what you deliver and how you work across the business. Embrace that point of difference that you have where you actually sit above the entire business and can see what's going on end to end. Make that your friend. Leverage that, be proud, talk about it, just stop hiding away in the back office somewhere.
Definitely. I like it.
Well said.
We've had some good comments as well, actually, on the back of so Ben says procurement's already fun.
We know that, Ben. I wouldn't say everybody else know that.
But Ben, is everyone in procurement fun? That's the question.
Well, yeah. Well, Larry says we've got to hire some fun people. We don't always get the names, but procurement's never boring, and I think we can all agree with that. Great. So, I don't know if there's anything anyone else wants to add, because I think we've sort of done the topic to death now, really, haven't we?
I think, to be honest, there's loads. loads of things that we probably haven't covered. I'd like to think that we've covered some of the more generic key points, but I would just like to add, Rich, I think we're at a turning point for procurement where we can really make a difference if we start adapting and moving forward. So I think there's a lot of things we need to stop doing, and I think we need to start being braver about doing procurement better and differently. Yeah, very passionate about that. Thanks, Kirsty.
Oh, can I just Ben's other comment? I quite like that. Can I just that last one at the bottom?
This is relevant to you.
Stop hiring mediocre people just because you're desperate for capacity.
Wow, define mediocre, Ben.
There is a talent shortage at the moment, but it is more than bums on seats that we need, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah. True. It's a really, I agree though. Just on my final comment would be, it's a really exciting time, I think, for procurement. I mean, we talked about a lot of stuff that's we need to stop, but there's so much that has started. You know, we won't talk about today the ESG agenda, sustainability, all the issues with supply chain procurement's coming to the forefront of that. I think as an industry, it's massive growth. It's allowed us as a business, on a personal note, to grow our team, grow our business, so we're very thankful of that and the profession. And I think I have to say as well, I was talking to someone yesterday, when you're in procurement, there's not many people tend to leave it. Retention of the profession is very, very strong. And there's a reason why that's the case. So I think everyone in procurement should be really proud of that. We talk about retention in businesses, but actually as a community and as a profession, I think it's got a very, very good retention. So
you said, but the one thing I've noticed over the last sort of 6 to 12 months is that I see more. I don't know whether it's just my network has sort of gone off, but there's more that have been sort of promoted outside of the profession. So people becoming managing directors and actually going into leadership positions within the business rather than just sort of staying within the procurement glass ceiling. So I think that's obviously extremely positive that they're leaving and going on to bigger things in business as well. But
yeah, definitely.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. Tom, really appreciate your time. Kirsty and Martin, as always, really great. We've obviously, this is released as a podcast, so do check out the podcast. It's available on all good platforms. And join us next time when we're going to tackle another big issue facing procurement. Until then, goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.